Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Hello, my name is Tyler Scripps, and for recording purposes, today is Thursday, April 11th. It is 10:30 a.m. This is panel number 17951, titled Colorado, the Quantum State. Before we get started, the University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty in their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. One other thing I'd like to mention is that we want to be sure to give you a chance to ask questions. Here is how we'll handle the Q&A. We'll reserve the end of the discussion for that Q&A. We're using a note card system to receive questions from the audience. At any time in the session, simply raise your hand to request a note card and pencil from one of our producers. Please write legibly. If you are a student, please note this on your question card. When you finish, raise your hand to hand it to the producer who will bring it up to me. I urge everyone to please make your questions brief and to the point. Now, I'd like to do a brief introduction of each panelist. For more information, you can find their full bios on the CWA website. Dana Anderson is a fellow of the Gilla Institute and a professor in physics and electrical engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder. He's co-founder and the former CEO of Cold Quanta, now Inflection, where he is the company's chief strategy officer. Corbin Tillman Dick is a founder and CEO of Maybell Quantum, the world's leading innovator in quantum infrastructure. He also serves as the chair of Elevate Quantum, a consortium of over 85 quantum-focused organizations in Colorado and the Mountain West. Quick note about me. I'm a student, a volunteer for the CWA. I'm a chair for the Science and Tech Committee. I've been very excited about this panel, so I hope all of you are as well. And a note to my panelists here, I'm a little skeptical about quantum, so I hope you don't take it personally.
I do, but he's more forgiving than I am.
Well, 1 for 2 is good enough. So initially, can you both just give a brief introduction of what is quantum and why it matters to the audience?
Dana, how about it?
You want me to start? Okay,
Absolutely.
First of all, hi everybody. And we both want to encourage you to write questions. We know each other a bit and we see eye to eye. We'd like to hear from you. What is quantum? And also let me put under your radar screen, why is quantum important? Quantum mechanics, quantum refers to quantum mechanics, which are the laws of physics, the laws that govern things in the universe as we best know it. And why is quantum important? It's because anything that you do, any task, given a set of resources, quantum tells you how well you can do a task. And that doesn't matter whether the task is computing or measuring things. And the reason it's important now is because today's technology allows us to operate at what's called the quantum limit. And in the future, if you're not operating at the quantum limit, doing as well as it's something as the laws of physics allow you to, you won't be competitive because other people will. And that's why quantum is important. It doesn't tell you everything about what quantum is, but I'm going to hand it over to my colleague here, Corbin, to give you more insight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important perspective on it. You know, the world as we know it today has two separate laws of nature that govern it, that we understand relatively well. The laws of classical mechanics, those are the things we all use every day. You throw a ball up, the ball comes back down. Everyone's used to those. They feel intuitive, they feel natural. There's a second set of laws, the laws of quantum mechanics, that govern things that are extremely small and extremely cold. And we don't interact with those on a day-to-day basis, consciously, but they are as good at predicting outcomes as the laws of classical mechanics. And right now, as a civilization, we are at the very beginning of a journey where we can start to leverage this second set of laws of nature to do things that would be unimaginable with only the laws of classical mechanics. We already use quantum on a regular basis. We aren't really aware of it, but a laser is a quantum phenomenon. That's really relevant to our lives. The clocks that run the GPS satellites that allow us to not only know where we are when we're navigating, but keep all of the clocks synchronized in our network switches and things like that. Those rely on quantum phenomenon. MRIs rely on quantum phenomenon. So we're already beginning to leverage some of these things. And in the next few decades, we're going to begin to leverage them in much more profound ways that transform civilization as much as anything we've ever done as a species. So quantum technologies are going to be as important to the next 100 years as transistors or cellular technology or radio as those were to the last 100 years. And we, Dana and I on the stage, CU as an institution, Colorado as a state, are at the foundation of that process and building a really exciting future.
Well, that does sound very exciting. Briefly before the panel, you had both mentioned that you took very different roles in getting to where you are today. Could you kind of describe your path briefly on how you got where you are, even though you've ended up at kind of a similar place?
Yeah, I think Dana might be offended to hear we ended up at a similar place because he actually knows what he's talking about.
I apologize.
No, but we are sitting next to each other. We're at a similar place. So I'm of the two of us, I'm the one on the straight and narrow. I was born from a physicist. My father was one of the physicists on the Manhattan Project. In academics, we refer to your academic lineage. So the person that was your PhD advisor, you call your academic father. His or her PhD is called their academic father or mother, and that would be my grandfather or grandmother. And you will have heard of my great academic grandfather, that was J. Oppenheimer. So my whole pathway has been in physics, and in 2007, it became very important to me to try to have put quantum in other people's hands, and then I founded this company called Quanta, now Inflection.
Yeah, and my path could hardly be more different. I studied mechanical engineering and economics. I spent 10 years as a strategy consultant at BCG. I made partner there. The whole time I was at BCG, I was working on what business considered cutting-edge tech.
BCG is?
Boston Consulting Group.
Thank you.
It's one of the three big strategy consulting firms. And so I did, mobile wallets cases in 2012, 2013. I did a bunch of AI-enabled app development. I did augmented reality work. And in 2017, I did a case for a company working on quantum. Big company, you all know their name. And for the first time in my entire career, I realized I was jealous of my clients. I realized that the work that they were doing was going to transform civilization in profound ways, and that as a consultant, I was on the outside looking in. And I didn't want to stay on the outside looking in, but unlike Dana, unlike my co-founder, candidly, I'm not a physicist. I'm not going to be the one to move the needles on the fundamentals, on how to make a better qubit. But what I could maybe help with is giving physicists the tools they need to succeed. And so that's where Maybell came from. We build quantum infrastructure. If you Google a picture of a quantum computer, you're going to see this beautiful golden chandelier. Not Dana's quantum computers, but most of them. You'll see these. Everyone loves to take pictures next to them. They're very shiny. They're very exciting. That chandelier, I'm letting you in on a secret, that's not a quantum computer. The chandelier is a refrigerator. And my company makes a refrigerator. The quantum computer is a little piece of silicon that fits in the palm of your hand and lives at the bottom of that chandelier. And in order to work, you have to get it extraordinarily cold. You can do that using lasers, like Dana does, or you can do it using the big chandelier, like IBM and Google and a number of others do. But there are these different approaches to make it so the noise of nature gets quiet enough that you can create, maintain, and manipulate these fragile quantum states. And so while our paths into the industry have been pretty different, I think what we share is this vision of what quantum can do for humanity going forward. And in a way that I've never had before in my career, a feeling that the work I'm doing every day is fundamentally contributing to the future of civilization in a way that hopefully makes it a lot better. Yeah.
Thank you. Getting to kind of the name of the panel here, Colorado, the quantum state, what does that mean? We've been built as a quantum state, a quantum hub. Can you describe that a little bit?
I'll jump in on this one.
Let him start, and I'll follow. Go ahead, Corbin.
So, back in the 1950s, 1960s, the federal government wanted to keep a lot of our most important technology progress as far away from the Russians as possible. So you had Los Alamos, you had Sandia, you had NIST here in Boulder. And those three institutions were some of the first institutions to leverage quantum to do useful things, and became a foundation that now has turned Colorado into the world's leading epicenter for quantum technologies. Now, what does that look like? Well, since 2000, we've had 4 scientists here in Colorado win Nobel Prizes for work in quantum. That is an astonishingly large number. But as importantly as the fundamental science, we have more companies here doing quantum work than in any other state, as measured by QEDC membership, which is a Quantum Economic Development Consortium, this big federal organization set up to convene quantum. That's not a per capita number. We've got more organizations working on quantum here than in California. That's shocking. We have more quantum jobs here in Colorado than in any other state. And recently, the Department of Commerce designated Colorado as one of 2 tech hubs for quantum. And hopefully that translates in the next few months to $150 million to really accelerate the industry. But we are an unmatched ecosystem in terms of the density and the application of quantum, going way beyond quantum computing, by the way, into sensing, timekeeping, networking, these other technologies that are also going to benefit hugely from quantum.
And let me just give you one example of something that at first may seem pretty mundane, but roughly 200 meters away from you is the world's most quantum thing today. And the world's most quantum thing today is, as I say, a little bit mundane at first, is a clock, something that keeps time in principle. But the thing to appreciate about it is that this clock, again, just 200 meters, 200 yards away from us, is 1,000,000 times more precise than the clock that keeps world time at NIST and at NIST-like places around the world. Factor of 1,000,000 times. And what makes this, first of all, the quantum state, Corbin has said it exactly right. It's our history that happens to have led us into quantum, but we are also at the forefront of quantum technology as a state beyond almost anybody's imagination. And the other thing to take away is that factor of 1,000,000. Well, think of the last iPhone you bought. If you're like me and you have to buy it every year, it maybe is 20 or 30% better in some ways than the last year's model. The quantum is making a factor of that 1,000,000 better than anything else that exists today. And again, this is the quantum state because we're having that kind of impact that you will see, your children will see emerge from this state.
Maybe it's worth talking a little bit about that impact side of things, because just saying quantum is exciting, quantum is better, it's easy to, everything is the next big thing in technology, right? It's important to take a step back and understand how profound these implications are. So every computer that anybody uses today, from a wristwatch to the most powerful supercomputers in the world, in their core they've got a whole bunch of wires, microscopic wires that are either charged or not charged, right? And depending on their charge state, they're a 1 or a 0 in a binary system. Your processor in your computer looks at each wire one at a time, one after another. It's happening really quickly. In a cell phone, it'll happen over 1 trillion times a second. But each transistor, each of those wires, is examined as its discrete sequential event. In a quantum computer, you have 2 really profound changes. The first is that instead of those 1s and 0s, you have what my co-founder once on a call with an investor, you'll like this, he referred to it as a physical object that can maintain a stable quantum superposition of states. While accurate, that is a profoundly unhelpful sentence. I think the more helpful way to think about it is every quantum bit exists as a probability, and only as a probability until you look at it. That's part of what makes quantum special. The second thing is that quantum bits don't resolve one at a time, one after another. Instead, these probabilities can be combined and can become a single quantum object through the principle of entanglement. Now, when that happens, it means that instead of computing power scaling linearly, so if you go from 1 to 20 bits, you've gone from 1 to 20 bits of computing power. That's what you've done. With a quantum computer with good qubits, you go from 1 to 20 qubits, and you've gone from 1 qubit of computing power to over 1 million qubits of computing power, 2 to the 20th power. That means that for some types of problems, things like molecular modeling, you take things that are literally impossible and you make them trivial. Right now, if you had every atom in the observable universe, and you turned it into a transistor, one of those 1s or 0s, and you used that computer, made from every atom in the observable universe, to try to write down the information that describes what penicillin is, you don't have enough transistors. It's literally impossible. We will never be able to define the base state energy of penicillin using a classical computer. A quantum computer with 286 perfect qubits, and we're a ways from perfect qubits, but Dana's working on it hard, can fully define penicillin. And by the time you get to a few thousand, you live in a world where you go to the doctors, they do a skin scraping on you, and while you're sitting in the waiting room, they do a full in silico drug trial for you, where they print new medicine that cures everything wrong with you and has 0 side effects. A drug trial that today costs $5.5 billion. They'll do for you while you wait in the waiting room. That's that millionfold or billion or trillionfold increase in computing power that Dana's referring to here. That's kind of the implication on why it matters. That's why governments all around the world are investing so much in trying to win this race to the quantum future.
And I'm going to say the same thing in completely different words as different example. So what Corbin told you about qubit and its ability, its entanglement, and so on. The remarkable thing about quantum mechanics, which can be very upsetting at first, is that a particle, for example, can be 2 places at the same time. It's not here with 50% probability and here with 50% probability. It is in both places for all practical purposes. But if you look, it goes away. It's only in one place. That's really spooky. That is the spooky part of quantum mechanics. But as far as we know, and we gave out Nobel Prizes recently for people that put that to the test as far as humanly possible to verify that fact. And to put a different spin on what we can do with quantum, not compute. So I want you to appreciate that many people follow the word quantum with the word compute. Quantum actually applies to many other things, sensing, timekeeping, all kinds of things. And one of my personally favorite projects now is to develop what's called, funny word, a gravity gradiometer. It will be put in space, orbit the Earth, and measure the Earth's gravity. And you'd think we kind of know the Earth's gravity, roughly speaking, because every time You jump up, something falls down. But if you can measure gravity very precisely, you can measure, for example, the melting of the polar ice caps, the shift in water as it rains, as glaciers move, things like that. And that allows us to say a lot about climate change. So it's not just about computing, it's about really changing our technological capabilities in many, many aspects. And as I give a talk often, the title of that talk is Quantum in the Kitchen, because today, it's no big deal. You have a cell phone in your kitchen. You actually have lasers in cell phone in your kitchen as well. 30 years from now, quantum will be sitting next to your toaster. We don't know exactly doing what, but if we look at what happened to transistors, if we look at what happened to lasers, they're sitting next to your toaster, more or less. And in 30 years, that's where quantum will be as well.
That's pretty good. Okay.
Are you still a skeptic? We can keep going.
No, I think you're starting to win me over.
Yeah,
This
we
seems
probably
like
have some
the place to
questions, which
go.
is great.
Yeah, I've got some student questions here. Some people are struggling to understand quantum computing and kind of and learn about the technology. What could be done to improve education, make it a little more approachable to the general public and to students?
I think you're the expert there.
Oh, yes. So there's a lot of mysticism around quantum, and the problem is that nominally today quantum is hard. You also don't really know how they make transistors inside of this thing. So what I strongly believe in, and Inflection is doing its utmost to do, is bringing quantum where you can start to play with it. You can sign on today and use, for example, the IBM quantum computer and quantum computers that are on Amazon Web Services. I want to encourage you to do that. But you can also do our kind of quantum, for example, with atoms. We've also placed technology on the cloud. And so for students, I want to encourage you to Google the word octant, O-Q-T-A-N-T. It has to have a Q in it. Octant, and that's a machine that allows you to laser cool yourself. There's a piece of hardware, just a couple of miles away from us, that allows you to cool atoms to a remarkable 100 billionths of a degree of absolute zero. All right, very, very close to absolute zero. And you can do that by online access, and then you can play with a quantum state. You can divide it in two, you can make it show up in two places at once. All the things that you hear about quantum, you can start to play with. So Inflection and a few other companies around the world are very much focused on providing educational tools. Why? Because, well, we want to hire you, right? And we want you to become equipped. But more importantly for me, I think that quantum will be as much a household word and familiar to you as gigabit. And those of you who buy a gigabit or a terabit or many megabytes of memory, in my early days, and maybe in some of the parents' early days, that was foreign jargon. Now it's everyday jargon. Quantum will eventually be everyday, and companies like mine are working very hard to bridge that gap between where we are today and where we want to be. Also, there are a number of texts out. One of my colleagues was an author on a book called Quantum for Babies. So don't be embarrassed. That's a good place to start. And there are plenty of books called Quantum for Dummies, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that's a follow-on is, do you have to know quantum mechanics to do quantum? And the answer is absolutely not. Basically, you can have it at your fingertips, or you can get a job in it without ever having what we physicists call solving Schrodinger's equation. You don't even have to do math to understand and be able to do quantum. Now, I happen to like math, and many of you might like math as well, so it's a blast, but you don't have to know it in order to innovate, think, and play with quantum stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my company, 80% of my employees are non-physicists, non-PhDs. These are welders, machinists, technicians who are building the stuff of quantum. None of them, and myself included, know how to solve Schrodinger's equation. And none of us have to, but we do know how to build stuff, right? I've hired people from stereo companies. I've hired drone hobbyists, who can solder small wires together reliably, and they're now building the stuff of quantum and as much a part of the quantum industry as the folks who have spent their careers with chalk on their fingers solving equations. Both of those pieces are necessary. Both are building the future of quantum. We absolutely need people to pursue PhDs in quantum. This industry is going to be transformative and profound. The best numbers out there right now are $3.5 trillion worth of value will be unlocked by quantum. For a little perspective on that number, that puts it between the healthcare industry and the US financial services industry, right? So that's a huge number. As importantly, that number is like somebody in the 1950s saying, this is what computers are good for, right? We don't know all of the stuff this will do, and getting there is gonna require a bunch more people with PhDs in quantum physics and adjacent areas in order to make this happen. And if you're passionate about that, and if that's what you wanna do, good, please do it. But if you like to build stuff with your hands and you like to, through law, through ethics, through policy, through mechanical engineering, through technician work, we also need a lot of people doing that stuff.
Everything.
And there are a whole bunch of pathways into this industry. And again, we're at the very beginning of this journey.
Yeah, I've got a student question here. What would you say are the toughest challenges in the world of quantum computing at the moment?
Each of us probably has one. So, there is not yet, despite all the noise and hype, there is today not a single working quantum computer that's doing anything as advertised. And there are about, today, depending on how you want to count, 5 completely different ways of building a quantum computer. They all have, every single one of 5 different ones. So IBM and Google use one approach. My company, along with Atom Computing here in town, along with a couple of others around the world, use atoms to try to make a quantum computer. There's a company in town called Quantinuum and IonQ that uses ions. There's people that uses light. We all have, in some sense, the same problem, which is it's a very difficult engineering problem. The physics is actually kind of done, and it's about getting control over qubits, and it's just darn hard. In the case of superconductors, which is related to the infrastructure that Corbin works on, it's getting superconductor transistors to behave very cleanly, without noise, very quietly. In the case of atoms, it's getting them cold and getting them under a great deal of control using laser beams. In the case of ions, it's similar to atoms. In the case of photons, it's really very different. It's all about getting rid of noise, believe it or not. And it's always an engineering as opposed to a hardcore physics problem. Want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at computing, the thing that humans are best at, there's actually an objective answer to this, and it's building transistors. There's nothing as a species that we've gotten better at. If you take a transistor, you change it from a 1 to a 0. These are these charged wires we were talking about earlier. They're the core of all computing today. You change that transistor from a 1 to a 0, you put it on a shelf, and you walk away for 1 trillion years. When you come back, that transistor statistically is doing exactly what you told it to do. With a quantum computer, superconducting qubits, you tell that qubit that you want it to have a 60% chance of being a 1 and a 40% chance of being a 0. You want it to have that superposition. You turn around for about 50 microseconds, and all of that information is gone. It stopped doing what you told it to do.
How long is a microsecond?
A microsecond is a vanishingly short period of time.
A millionth of a second.
You cannot blink, your heart cannot beat. There's nothing that you do that takes a microsecond. So it is truly a vanishingly short period of time. Now, you can actually accomplish a fair bit in microseconds when you're talking about compute, but it's not long. Similarly, getting back to transistors, We, at this point, have built more transistors than anything else, right? It's 13 sextillion transistors. I was talking to
I
Dana
had
about
asked what a
this
sextillion
morning.
was.
Yeah.
I lost.
I think it's to the 21, but I'm not positive. It's an unimaginably large number. Here's how large that number is. You go back to the first human ever born, 200-odd thousand years ago. We have, since that human as a species, taken fewer breaths than built transistors, right? We have built a lot of transistors. We are really good at that. Right now, the biggest quantum computers in the world have a few hundred, maybe 1,000 quantum bits. Right? Those are small numbers, very small numbers. And those qubits are pretty lousy qubits right now. Right? They don't really want to do what we tell them to do. We need to get better at all of that before we live in a world where we're sitting in the doctor's waiting room and they do the drug trials. Now, the good news is the first transistors were used in hearing aids and radios and used in single digits, right? Just a couple transistors in a sensing application to solve a useful problem. And we're already seeing that in quantum. A couple qubits or other quantum devices. There's a company here based at CU called LongPath that uses a frequency comb, which is a quantum device, and they basically can set up a tower, and if a cow farts on the horizon, they can sense the methane from it, right? That's really useful because methane leaks are hugely problematic. So they just got $200 million from the federal government to expand this network of methane detectors. That's an early application of a useful quantum device. But going from these early applications of useful quantum devices to ubiquitous quantum computing, it's going to be a long road. Now, is it 7 years, 15 years, or 30 years? I don't know. But it's a road that we're on, and it's one that we're working on, and countries who are not so friendly to us are working on it hard also. And so we need to make sure that we're investing appropriately to bring that timeline forward and to make sure it happens here.
I hope, anyway, I hope we answered your question. If not, ask it in a different way.
Dana, could you give any thoughts on what that road, how long it might be to get to quantum being a little bit more ubiquitous?
Oh, look, so many people follow the word quantum mentally with the word computer. Quantum computing is definitely far off. Quantum other things are not. Yeah. First of all, atomic clocks are very quantum. And for example, they're in every data server that's Amazon, Google, what have you, have atomic clocks. We can make a better clock. There's already a market and already customers for better clocks, even if you wonder, why the heck do you need to know what time it is so well? It turns out to be incredibly useful. Did you know that every single financial transaction ever made, whether you're at a cashier at Starbucks or you're doing high-speed trading at a financial institution through the internet, is time-stamped? And those timestamps is itself a huge business. And clocks are used in very secure comm. They're used by the military. They're used in energy grids. There already is a market, and there are already quantum products out there. The big impact ones are going to continue to evolve, and the computer may take a bit longer, but quantum really already is out there. And you won't see it so much until the compute and some other things hit the headlines. But it really is there.
Oh, you caught me off guard there just a second. I've got this is a question of mine also from the audience. Is this going to be a big impact on the environment? Are we going to have horrible chemicals coming off quantum computers? Are they going to be sucking down megawatts and full power plants?
Can I start with that?
Please. Yeah.
What a great question. So here's an aspect that's not very well appreciated. The other big technological boom these days, which you can't help hearing about, is called, that's a quiz. Thank you, AI. The amount of computational power required to do AI is unbelievable. And that computational power turns into electricity. It's the energy grids, being able to supply the power to the chips that enable you to do AI. So one of the reasons why quantum computing is so interesting is that in comparison, they don't use a lot of power. They can be very power efficient, even if they use, in our case, a big laser, even if in Corbin's case, they use a big refrigerator. By comparison to the GPUs that carry out artificial intelligence processing, quantum computers are believed to be promising as very efficient computational engines. So that's one key. And do they, does it take nasty chemicals, et cetera, to make quantum computers? I would say, first of all, the winners of quantum computers, what the technology is not very clear today. The kind of things that Corbin appeals to versus what my company appeals to, atoms in my case, superconducting semiconductors in his case, the jury's out and who wins. So I don't quite know, but in the end, for sure, they won't cost the energy tax that the silicon chips that are used in AI today, I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, they'll be much more power efficient.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Two things to add there. The first is just continuing what you're saying and trying to put some numbers around it, right? So the first example of what they like to call quantum supremacy, a problem that you could solve with a quantum computer faster than with a classical computer. Google published a paper on an example of that in 2019. This was not a useful problem, right? This was a problem specifically designed to be as hard as possible for a classical computer and as easy as possible for a quantum computer. But in that example, they pointed a quantum computer at a problem for 128 seconds using 25 kilowatts of energy, and they solved it. And the most powerful supercomputer in the world, which is a 20-odd megawatt system, so 1,000 times more energy, would have had to work on that problem for several weeks, so a few thousand times more time in order to solve it. So that was about a billion-fold decrease in energy consumption to solve that problem. More recently, just last month, D-Wave did a paper. Have you read the D-Wave paper?
Not yet.
It's a good one.
Good.
In my opinion. I'm not good at reading these papers.
Didn't do my homework.
But they solved a problem that is more relevant. So this isn't one that was designed to be hard for a classical computer. It's just something that is hard for a classical computer, quenching a non-equilibrium magnetic system, bunch of dipoles.
I know exactly what that is.
Neither do I.
Doesn't matter.
It's fine. But it's a generic problem that's very hard for a classical computer, and they, in a couple seconds, solved something that, by best estimate today, and again, this is something that we've tried to do with classical computers, would take the most powerful supercomputer in the world somewhere between 100 million years and 1 billion years, right? So that's that energy savings that Dana was referring to. There's another piece of this, though, which is quantum has the potential to literally turn back the clock on climate change in some really important ways. Right now, 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions are associated with the production of ammonia for fertilizer, right? It's critical that we do this, otherwise we couldn't have 8 billion people on Earth, but it takes a lot of energy. Now, we know that it's possible to synthesize ammonia using about 99.99% less energy, because bacteria do it. But we don't know how they do it. And I expect, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm willing to say it from a stage, I expect that the moonlander moment for quantum will be when some company, Dana's company, Google, IBM, Amazon, one of them defines the Hamiltonian, explains the full structure of ammonia in a way that allows us to take this 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions and turn it into effectively zero. That will drive trillions of dollars in value over the course of many years, and it'll drive enormous impact on the environment. Beyond that, there are things like lithium-air batteries or zero net energy carbon sequestration catalysts, things that we know should be possible in nature, but we don't know as a species how to make them yet, that quantum will allow us to do. that when we talk about it fundamentally changing civilization, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the biggest problems for the world today becoming things that we just don't have to worry about anymore because we have full access to the relevant information to solve them fully. Now, that's not happening quickly. Neither Dana or I wants you to leave here and say, Corbin said that quantum's going to solve all these problems next week. No, this is going to take time, but it's a change worth pursuing and investing in. And it's why both of us are doing what we do.
I'd like to go back to something you said earlier, Dana, about AI. Are you telling me that Skynet is what you're doing? Are you working on that?
No, but ask your question more fully if you want me to say more on AI.
What will what kind of advancements should we be expecting as computing through quantum becomes more popular and more prevalent?
So first of all, for me, AI comes in two flavors. Most of what you hear about is called big data AI. When AI is telling you what you would probably like to watch this evening on TV, that's big data AI. And who's ever supplying your television entertainment has put a lot of energy into collecting a lot of data that have a lot of people like you. And when you watch J. Oppenheimer because of a recommendation, for example, it's because a lot of people like you have decided to watch it. That's called big data. There are places where quantum will play a role in that kind of AI, but there's another kind of AI, and that's making things work very well. It's making things, taking in long sentences, for example, and understanding a word in a sentence, what it is because of the context around that word. Or it's getting a system for navigating in space between the Earth and the Moon to do that very, very precisely. And AI and machine learning have big roles to play together with quantum in two ways. One, quantum is complicated, very complicated even when you are good at it. And AI provides a mechanism for getting quantum things to behave well, and the reverse is also true. Quantum, in some cases, can be made to utilize AI in ways that you just can't or don't want to or just don't make sense for a quantum system. Again, in sensors, for example, making sensors perform well, you can use AI, and getting sensors to help AI systems will be a big future role for quantum.
I've got a student question for you guys. What are your biggest concerns when it comes to potential negative impacts of quantum, if any?
Oh, I mean, every technology can have negative impacts, and Skynet could be one of them, right? And I don't think that's going to happen, but the fact of the matter is this is enormous compute that can be used both for good and for ill. It'll help us understand the nature of the universe, but if a bad person understands the nature of the universe better, they're better at doing bad things with it, right? It's part of why I think our investment in quantum today and in building up the foundation around that so that the quantum future is one that is inclusive and just and equitable, so that we have frameworks around quantum ethics. I think all of that is essential, and it's essential that we do it now so that we don't end up playing catch up once the horse has left the barn, once this technology has gotten away from us.
That's actually something that fascinates me about the evolution of quantum actually around the world. Quantum is on the minds of government in just about every country that is oriented towards technology. And very early on, that is now, there are entities that worry about quantum standards, about ethical application of quantum, about quantum law. And in fact, there is a consortium in the US called the Quantum Economic Development Consortium that was stood up by the first quantum initiative in the US, so by the US government. And they have groups that worry about these things and collaborate with other similar consortia around the world to get a leg up on the ethical issues, the concerns, the legal issues, the concern for export and how we manage to govern in a reasonable way quantum technology so that primarily it is used in good and ethical ways.
So, you both own companies. You've got some financial requirements going on. How commercially viable is quantum right now? Who are you selling to? And if you're up to it, who's more successful?
They're very different companies. I don't think that the success can be measured in the same way across the companies. My company's an infrastructure company. And so we are selling picks and shovels in the quantum gold rush. We're Levi Strauss while other folks are mining for gold, right? And that is the entire focus of my company, which is great from a business perspective. It means we build stuff for a nickel, sell it for a dime, and get to make that difference in profit, right? And that's something that we can already do today, and we're small today, but the market for what we're doing is already billions of dollars, and we are rapidly growing and taking share from our competitors around the world, and pretty well positioned to define this space, right? We've done some innovative things that make our products better. That's very different than the problems that Dana is trying to solve.
I have to laugh, especially for students. I've had many come up and said, I'd like to start a quantum company. And I've often said, if you want to make money, don't start a quantum company. And the joke is that the company, I'm not sure if actually that's made by Pop Sockets, but there's a company that makes this little piece of plastic that goes in the back of your phone so you can hold it. They're called Pop Sockets. They are a Boulder, Colorado company. My company was expanding and moved into one of their buildings. They're a $200 million company. They make something for about 80 cents and they sell it for $10. That's a good business model. Co-Quantum, my company, was started in 2007 before it was referred to Quantum, and we were profitable by year 3 selling things. That was a successful company. But as Quantum grew, we were never that profitable, we weren't big. As Quantum grew to maintain leadership in what we do, we went out and raised money. Starting in that year we raised money, we became not profitable. So it's a very interesting journey. We sell things today. We are developing quantum technology both for education, to enable other people to do quantum, and to utilize quantum, for example, in clocks. We work on everything from timekeeping to sensing for navigation and guidance to new ways of making radio receivers, such as like in your phone, and quantum computers. But we're a long way off from being realizing a good fraction of, what did you say that the market size was?
3.5 trillion.
With 3.5 trillion, but we won't mind having only 10% of that market. But that's a long way off. But we are very passionate, very driven. Who's more successful? Well, these guys are selling picks and shovels, and I think they're fantastically successful. We make quantum things, and that's really hard to do. And I'm very proud of the fact that my company is the first in the world to have a quantum thing operating on the International Space Station since 2018, orbiting the Earth for now, 2024, for 6 years, and we're about to build the next generation of systems. We're very proud on that. Is it changing the world, making lots of money? No, but I call that a great success. As I said, we are the first one in the entire world to do that. And we're very proud of it, and it's an important step towards having major impact in this new class of technology.
Yeah, and I think it's always worth noting, the plane that the Wright brothers built was not useful, right? You could walk that distance in a minute, and it was in no way a useful machine, right? But it laid the foundation for the entire aerospace industry. And the work being done by scientists building quantum things, some of them are beginning to be useful, but a lot of them, the use for them is the science they're doing, right? And that's critically important if we want to have a future where infectious disease and cancer don't exist anymore, right? Where if we want to have a future where the clock on climate change has been turned back and we don't need to worry about the state of the planet that we're leaving for our children. If we want to have a future where we can become, the best version of our species that we could become, we need to invest in the fundamental science that leads to the fundamental breakthroughs that lead to the commercialization of quantum. So what my company is doing is a lot easier. It's easier to build the picks and shovels. But you guys built some picks and shovels too.
We do picks and shovels.
Yeah.
We do a lot.
But Dana's company and their aspirations are profound and fundamental in a way that we want to help.
Could you speak briefly on quantum and quantum computing on the international stage? Who should we be worried about, and what might that look like for us going forward?
Everybody. Everybody truly is, as I said, anybody who's got a technological context to develop it is involved in quantum. The first country to recognize the national security and economic impact of quantum as a technology was the United Kingdom. And back in 2014, they invested 270 million pounds as a government in quantum. Europe followed, we came later. Australia came before the US as well in their quantum inclinations, more formally recently. But China is also started very early on spending more than just about everybody else at the time put together. India just started their quantum investment about a year ago. Japan. In fact, my company is participating in what's called one of the Japanese moonshot programs. We're helping them to build their quantum computer. So every country is in a race. And the thing that's interesting to watch about this is quantum really is hard. And what most of us have concluded, by most of us I mean countries, is we can't do this alone. We have to collaborate internationally because it's too hard. And so there's an interesting, back and forth going on as each country wants to have complete control over its quantum. Each country has recognized that we shouldn't be doing this by ourselves. Let's interact together. So, for example, Inflection is here in the US. We have an office in the UK that's very successful, has 60 people. We've just started an office in Australia. We have an effort in Japan. This is very much a world technology, and in some ways, in some cases, a race, because we would like to have quantum, we would like the US and our like-minded countries to be leader in this very, very important technology and not fall behind. So everybody's playing in it. Everybody wants to win, but the fact is it is a global effort and we all need to help each other.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the dollars being spent right now, for every $1 the US federal government is spending on quantum, China's spending 8, right? And a lot of that's made up by private sector investment and other things like that. The US is still, I think by most measures, the world leader in this technology, but we're not gonna stay the world leader unless we invest, unless students choose quantum relevant majors, unless we create a pipeline of talent, a pipeline of genius to make sure that the future, the quantum future, is defined here. It's gonna get defined somewhere else, and it will be as profound as any technological leap that we've ever made, and there are risks of having a China or a Russia or somebody like that define that future rather than us.
I've got another student question here. Paraphrasing a little bit, traditional silicon computers progressed in a somewhat linear pattern, have kind of plateaued. Should we expect to see something similar in quantum, take off and slow down?
We're a long ways from that time, and so it's very hard to say. Yeah, Moore's law is fascinating, right? Moore's law is this idea that every 2 years the packing density of transistors doubles. And it has continued up until pretty recently, consistently, since the invention of the first transistor, right? The implication of that is profound, but right now we are almost at the atomic limit of how tightly you can pack a transistor, right? We're talking less than 10 atoms of gap in the transistors right now. Makes it very hard to fit more. So we are beginning to plateau there. Because quantum computing...
Let's wave goodbye. Thank you for coming.
Because quantum computing, an incremental transistor, an incremental qubit, doesn't increase your computing power by 1 qubit, it exponentially increases your computing power with mature qubits. It is unlikely that you will end up with a similar slowdown, and if you do end up with a similar slowdown, it's in a very, very distant and advanced future, probably.
Yeah, I told you the humankind's most quantum thing is 1,000,000 times better, and that factor of 1,000,000 would take a while to permeate throughout the technology. So for your future and my future, there's no end in sight any more than there was in 1950, shortly after the invention of the transistor, that they could really see an end. By now, we indeed see where we're running up against the wall with Moore's law, but in the early days, it was very hard to see the end in sight. So that's where we are in quantum. And there's one other thing I'd like to add to that question. If you visit Corbin's company, Maybill, or mine in Inflection, you would say, well, that's really cool and fancy and modern. The way you need to think about quantum is everything that you would see or think about today is extraordinarily primitive.
Yeah.
That's the way you have to think about it, and because we're early days. And so we have a very, very long way to go before we would say it's modern, it's sophisticated, the way that we think of iPhones and their competitors as modern and sophisticated. That's a long way off. It's coming, but a long way off.
Would you like to spend a couple of minutes, is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Sort of anything we've missed so far? Anything that you'd like to highlight about each other's businesses, perhaps?
Well, I want to tell you something. So we had breakfast together this morning because we live...
It's been too long since we caught up.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we caught up. You know, one of the things I want to say is I hear often, my wife is also a professor here, by the way, and we hear often the phrase work-life balance. And for me, that's a very strange saying because for me, in what I do, life is very much intermixed with work. And actually at Inflection, and I suspect also at Maybill, it's true that one feels you're doing something useful and having impact. And for sure, that work is part of life and the satisfaction of life. So that's one thing I want to say about our companies is it's very clear to us, even if it's early days, and even if some things give us would give us heartburn because it's not easy to start a company and make it work and try to make a profit and so on. We're very much aware that we're having an impact, and that's how we're trying to move the needle on this world. And it's a very good feeling. And so for students or your children and so on, it's an exciting time in quantum because it's very early days, and there's a sense that something is happening, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, I think that's right. What you said this morning really resonated with me. BCG was a great job. It is a group of the smartest people you'll ever working on the hardest problems that companies have. You're never doing something boring. And while I was there, I constantly was striving to figure out how I could have a life. And now, because of the nature of the work that we're doing, and this is what we were talking about this morning, I feel like I'm so excited about what I'm part of at Maybell that, yes, I'm home for dinner with my kids pretty much every day, do bedtime routines, sometimes work late after that. Of course, I'm at a high growth startup, you've got to do that, right? But it doesn't feel like an alternative to what I want to do. It is what I want to do. It's the impact I want to have. It's what I want to leave behind for my kids. It's how I want to make the world a better place, is through what I've been able to build now a business around doing. It's an incredibly gratifying feeling.
And I want to extend that. I'm old. I want to extend it that I feel very patriotic. I want the U.S. and like-minded countries to be technological leaders. To me, we gave away a lot of technology in the past. We don't make those chips that are inside your phone, your TV, et cetera. We don't make that here. It's made in Taiwan or other places. We would like to ensure that we have leadership in the technology, and we'd like to ensure, we'd like to ensure that when it comes to the useful and important national security applications of quantum technology, that we've placed this country on the forefront. So there's also a patriotism underneath the hood here of why we think this is important.
I'm glad you mentioned cybersecurity and those sort of concerns just now. What kind of threats are there to that? Should I worry about my bank account getting hacked from quantum?
I every day, there is a machine gun of attacks on just about any computer that sits in any place. And cybersecurity is a huge concern. When I said national security, cybersecurity is certainly a portion of that, which is incredibly critical and problematic. But I also mean the defense of our country. I also mean intelligence security, not just cyber, so all kinds of aspects of security. But cybersecurity is on the forefront of the battlefield these days, and it's absolutely frightening. You think spam is bad. We're being attacked constantly, and it's only going to get worse. Will quantum actually impact that anytime soon? I personally don't think in a big way anytime soon. It'll still be very much a classical defense. However, there are ways, for example, of communicating with the help of quantum physics, which is very, very secure. And it's a nice example of something that Corbin said a few minutes ago. The first country to demonstrate a quantum communication with a space element to it was China. Yep. In a very competent, very good paper on secure communication in space. So that says that says a few things. One is, again, we're not alone in doing this. Two is security, in this case for communication, is in the top of everybody's list, and cybersecurity in particular. I'm just saying that in the short term, I don't see quantum having a big impact on cybersecurity, but other aspects of security indeed.
Yeah, so people talk about how quantum computers will crack all encryption, and they will, but by the time you have a quantum computer big enough to do that, it's big enough to do a lot of other really, really important things too. We're a long ways from that. Now, there is vulnerability today to what are called harvest now, decrypt later attacks, right? A lot of things you only care about them being secret for a little while. Other things, if they're secret today, you kind of want them to stay secret 20, 30 years down the road. Those ones, we need to start applying quantum safe algorithms to them. We think there are algorithms that are also resistant to quantum attacks. And the federal government is prioritizing their own databases to say which ones are going to get this extra layer of security on them. But that'll happen eventually. But that's a very distant quantum future. And most of the stuff that Dana and I have talked about today, with the ending of infectious disease, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from production of fertilizer, all of these other things, those are going to happen first and change the world for the better. And guess what? The encryption algorithm that you were using 15 years ago can also be cracked by any computer today. Right? We're used to updating encryption algorithms. We'll be able to do that with quantum also, but it's certainly something that we don't want to be late to that party, because it does matter. It's just a ways out.
In our last 3 or 4 minutes here, I thought this question from a student was a great kind of ending note. In simple terms, what is quantum? What do I tell my grandparents at the dinner table?
Quantum is the science of the very small and the very cold. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would differ a little bit, because fundamentally quantum doesn't have to be small. It's more practical when it does. One of the Nobel Prize in 2001 was given to Colorado scientists Eric Cornell and Carl Wieman for creating what was then the largest quantum state, which was almost as big as a human hair. Still small, but hardly much bigger than an atom. So I think as time goes on, we may get larger and larger control. What is quantum? It's not an easy question, because the inherent nature, and let me give you an example of that. Just about every object, every particle, every atom, every electron has 2 ways of being thought about. One is as a particle, ping pong ball, and one of them is as a wave, the wave in an ocean, or the acoustic waves that are receiving at your ear. And it's called the quantum mechanical duality. Another thing that was related to my colleague's Nobel Prize work is the fact that you take atoms, think of them as ping pong balls, and you take 2 clouds and you have them merge. Now, if you had 2 clouds and really thought about that, they would just be sort of 2 clouds. But when you merge 2 clouds of atoms in this quantum state, suddenly parts of the cloud go absolutely away and other parts get much stronger. That's the wave behavior of ping pong balls. And physicists who are experts, and I'll consider myself an expert, don't really get into the infinite loop of saying why, like your children might. They just do. We know how to deal with quantum mechanics, but the sense that there's a clear understanding that you can have where there isn't something that's a little bit mysterious, that actually never happens. There is an absolute mystery in quantum for saying this thing is both solid, like a particle, but it also has wave properties, and which is useful to thinking about depends on how I use it. So what is quantum? It is this dual way of having to think about things as waves and as particles, which is never really resolved satisfactorily. And you can make a lot of money, I suppose, as a philosopher on it, or write a lot of books, but it is inherently the nature of quantum, where it becomes very difficult to say, well, it's just like X, except. And in fact, there have been quite a few Nobel Prizes in some recent ones for proving that there's not something we don't understand somehow inside of particles. Quantum mechanics is a complete, apparently, description. And with that complete description, is what I'd call an inherent stress about having two views that are never completely resolved. The magic never really quite goes away. It's kind of unhelpful until you do it enough where you just get used to speaking the language, and then you can solve problems, but you can't explain it to the kids such that they're happy and say, now I understand.
Now you see why I say small and cold.
Yes. I would like to refer back to the simple terms.
He's right, by the way, 100%, and mine's more simple.
Yeah.
And on that note, I believe we're at time. So thank you for everyone being here. Hope you had a good time.